Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today I'm going to explain everything you need to know about Facebook's new Libra cryptocurrency project. Now obviously I've been a passionate advocate for Bitcoin for a number of years now, but I've also been a Facebook user and I've seen the value firsthand of running a business and how Facebook does get people's attention, that convenience factor. So it'd be remiss of us just to dismiss this because Facebook is going to make some inroads to some degree and there's still billions of people that use Facebook every day and get value from it in some form or another. So to start off with, let's dive into some of the terminology. Most of us are pretty familiar with the Bitcoin blockchain. Well, Facebook's blockchain is going to be called the Libra blockchain. They threw around the term global coin, but it looks like their nomenclature now is the Libra token, and that's not to be confused with the Libra investment token, a security token that they're throwing around as well, which I'll talk about later on in the piece. We obviously have Bitcoins that we store in our Bitcoin wallet, and Calibra is the name of the wallet services, that branch of this Facebook venture at the moment. Now, it's important to note that this looks like it's coming out of Geneva as well. So Facebook are kind of trying to segregate themselves. And if you read through the white paper, it talks about how they plan this to be more open source in the future. But I'm going to get into why I don't really think that is possible. You can't sort of have it both ways as well. So let's get into the properties that make Bitcoin so great. The fact that it's open source to anyone. You can download a wallet, you can build your own wallet, you can run your own node, anyone can send money to anyone. That is very open in nature. And that's not going to be the case with Facebook, particularly for the properties that we're going to get into as well. Now, when we talk about governance, who decides what happens on Bitcoin? Well, it's the developers, the community. If you don't like something that happens, you can hard fork away. And we've seen that happen. If you think you've got a better use case, hard fork the code away and create your own coin as well. So Facebook coin is not going to have that sort of governance model. It looks like the people that buy the nodes for $10 million each, they're the ones that are going to sort of get to decide how this all operates. So if you think about decentralization, we often talk about that scale. It's not just a yes or no answer. Facebook are looking for 100 businesses or corporations to put forward $10 million to buy a node, rather than Bitcoin where we have 10,000 or more people that can download the open source code for free and run a node. So I'd say it's definitely not on the decentralized scale. Although it might have more nodes in future, there's always those central points where if governments get angry enough, they can just issue each of those nodes a letter saying, hey, shut that down. Now that gets into the next thing we want to talk about, which is whether or not it's permissionless. So with Bitcoin, if users have control of their own private keys and their own wallet, you can send money to anyone without their permission. And I don't think that's going to be the case with Facebook Coin. Now they're talking about this being more open and permissionless on the blockchain level if you read the white paper, but the fact is with all the AML and KYC, different laws in different jurisdictions and whatnot, governments are already starting to push back. We saw today from France and even the US Congress. I don't think this is going to be a simple case of anyone can send money to anyone. And that's where we get into that censorship resistance as well. So think about with Bitcoin, there's no dispute process. And I think Facebook is going to have that. If someone sends money to someone that they don't like or chargebacks and all that sort of thing, dispute resolution is an absolutely huge part of the banking sector. And I think Facebook are going to face that issue as well. So is it borderless? No, Bitcoin doesn't care what country you're in. Facebook is. It's going to have to ban, Iran, North Korea, those countries on the sanction list, as well as individuals and all that sort of thing. So it definitely does have some borders. Is it private? Well, we know that Bitcoin is not anonymous, and there's a bit of a difference between the level of privacy and if it's completely anonymous. So Bitcoin is what we call pseudonymous, where you don't really have your name and all your personal data attached to an address. If you're using an exchange, maybe that's a bit different. But if you're using your own open source wallet and different addresses each time, Bitcoin can be relatively private. I don't think that is going to be the case with Facebook. Again, you're going to have to get an on-ramp, an ID, a profile, and all that data is going to be attached to your Calibra wallet and so on. So I just don't think there's any way that government and regulators are going to allow for private transactions, as we've seen them push back on privacy coins as well. So is it secure? Well, Bitcoin has $100 billion billion plus bounty if anyone can hack the network, and it is the most secure computer network in the world, running for 10 years to date. Now, these other more centralized chains, recently we have seen them run into issues. So even a project as established and as great as Stellar recently had some downtime. So you have to ask yourself, hey, there's always that risk when you have the centralized nodes that they can be targeted with DDoS attacks, personal IDs. How often do we hear about Facebook profiles being hacked and whatnot? So I'm just not sure about the security. And obviously Bitcoin's not perfect either. If you don't control your private keys well on a hardware wallet, yeah, you can get hacked as well. But I think this is going to face a lot more security issues from hackers and whatnot going forward. Now, what's the value proposition here? Well, we know that Bitcoin has scarcity as one of its properties, and that halving drops that inflation when we compare to central banks that are ramping up and printing more money each and every year. And that is really interesting when we talk about the value. So Facebook coin is going to be some sort of stable coin, but it's not going to be pegged to $1. They're talking about it being pegged to a basket of currencies. Some of you might have heard of the IMF's special drawing right. And you can think of that as a floating basket of those currencies rather than just being pegged to one of the most used international currencies as well. So I'm not really sure that that's where you get any value from, but they're talking about it in terms of an investment that you might be able to park a lot of that money in bonds or interest accounts. Not that there's high interest rates these days, but get a little bit of yield. So Facebook have already talked about getting into the banking, so people can have their coins on their Facebook app and they might earn a little bit of interest this year. So it's not a home run investment, which Bitcoin really has been, and I think is going to continue to be going forward. The other part of that is that Libra investment token, security token that I spoke about, where maybe they're going to give the backers and the initial investors returns on top of that yield in the way of fees that they collect and all that sort of thing as well. So I don't think that necessarily that's going to be a great investment, particularly compared to Bitcoin. So is this competition? And absolutely, guys, the answer to that is yes. If we look at how profitable banks have become these days, why is everyone breaking into this sector? Amazon's responsible for 20% of all payments made in the US. Apple are releasing Apple Pay. Everyone wants to get into this space and launch their own coin token because banks have had it so good, this rent-seeking nature of just fleecing fees. If I pay someone at a coffee shop, a lot of the time people don't realize behind the scenes, Visa and MasterCard, Western Union, whoever it is scraping a big fee, a lot of it on the back end, and these middlemen that take value away from the end users when we go peer-to-peer for a fraction of that cost. So yes, that is why Facebook are huge competition. But to the incumbent payment and banking system, they've spoken about wanting to get into the credit card and lending space as well. So they're going to need all these licenses. And that's when they're going to run into a lot of problems, I think, with how they're going to govern this, and governments themselves pushing back individual countries. A lot of the powers that be, think about the deep pockets and how frustrated some of the players in this space get at Bitcoin and what it's trying to disrupt. Well, now you've got Facebook that have already abused our data and privacy in a lot of ways, now trying to get into the most profitable industry and one of the oldest industries. And you can put your tinfoil hat on here, but I think there's going to be a lot of upset people that they're trying to get into that territory as well. So yes, Facebook is competition, but ultimately Bitcoin is trying to replace this entire incumbent system that Facebook itself is competing with. So tying this all together, is Facebook coin going to be useful? And I think the answer is that yes, we have to remember that 99% of people don't really care about a lot of these properties. It's convenience for them. So when they go to a soccer match and they check in on Facebook with their friends, and then it says, hey, do you want to catch an Uber home? And Facebook have already partnered with Uber, and then it's going to come out and be paid with your Libra coin on the way home. That convenience for a lot of people is going to be great. They're going to use it a lot, but it's probably going to be like having that cash in your wallet. You might have a little bit of Libra coin on Facebook, just like we have in WeChat in China, for people to pay for day-to-day items. It's not that investment that we want where people are worried about money printing and QE, all these other properties in these more remote countries that we're currently seeing undergo really tough times. So Bitcoin has a lot of those properties. And if we think about trust, equality, and freedom, all those things that Bitcoin has, I don't think anyone can really agree that Facebook is going from that angle as well. So it's Bitcoin for me, guys, but I do think Facebook is going to get a lot of traction and lead a lot of people on their own blockchain journey about money, debt, and banks, the same as you did. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share these videos around, and thanks for tuning in, guys. Cheers.